So this is the DJI FPV drone, and I have been flying the heck out of this. Every opportunity I can get, I'm flying this drone. But if you're anything like me, then your background is probably in GPS camera drones, like the Mavic series of drones, for instance, like this one here. This is a Mavic Air 2, and I love this drone, but it's not this. And this has been an interesting ride to go from this to this. I've learned a lot on the way. Now, if you're thinking about buying one of these and you've already got one and your background is in this, then I've got a few tips for you guys based upon the experiences I've had learning to fly this in the last month. More about those after this. What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Keith, and on today's video I'm going to be talking about this, the DJI FPV drone. And more importantly, I'm going to be giving you some tips based upon the experiences I've had transitioning from one of these to flying this. It doesn't replace this because this is unlike anything that DJI has ever made before. It doesn't have the intelligent flight modes that this has. It can take pictures, but they ain't that good. This is more for that sort of cinematic first-person view footage that you can get, and it's quite a good drone for that. It's also a hybrid FPV drone, so it does have GPS-enabled modes, but they don't behave exactly in the same way as this. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. This is the second version of the goggles that DJI have produced. The first version was produced for FPV pilots, and one of the biggest complaints around the V1 goggles was this foam. And the foam that ships with them is really uncomfortable, and it lets a lot of light in around the nose, which can be very distracting. So the first tip I've got for you guys is upgrade the foam on these goggles, because for whatever reason DJI decided to just include the same stock foam they had on the V1 goggles, even though most people hate it, and replaced it. So yes, you can get this foam upgrade kit from the DJI website. There are third-party ones around there, but I've heard a few people complaining about it pinching their nose, whereas the DJI one is pretty comfortable and it really does lessen the light leak, and it's just so much more comfortable to fly and less distracting, because you're going to need all your attention on flying this puppy. All your settings are handled through here, and out of the box I would say there's a few things that you're going to want to immediately adjust. One of the things that I've seen a lot of people complaining about is when they download the footage from the drone, you can see the props in either side of the footage. That's because this camera has a huge wide field of view. It's up to 150, which is great for the pilot because that enables you to have more of a judgment when you're flying through tight gaps and things like that. But it's not so cinematic on your footage. Now, there is a setting where you can set so that it will narrow the field of view, but only on the drone. Now, because the settings are all managed through here, and because DJI, as of yet, have given us no way to really screen record what's going on through here, and in my review video of this drone, which you can find here, I found it very difficult to get a GoPro in there to film what you were seeing. So I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to put a cheat sheet below. So this is the setting you need to change, and you change it to aircraft only. So you still get that wide field of view in your goggles, but you don't get it in your footage. That's one setting. Another one is to make sure that your image stabilization is on. It's called EIS, although it's referred to in all the marketing bump as rock steady, which is the same sort of stabilization technology you get on the Osmo Action. It's referred to in the settings as EIS. Make sure that that is on. When you're flying this drone, you're going to see a lot of shake in the goggles. That's not actually happening as long as your EIS is on in the drone. The EIS is being applied to the drone footage, but not to the footage that's actually being transmitted to the goggles. So take note of that. Don't worry about it, because when you actually download the footage from the drone itself, it will be a much more stabilized. One more thing to note, you can put an SD card in your goggles and record from that as well. The reason that you can do that is if you crash this and you crash it far enough away, you can play back the footage off this, and that will help you locate the drone. What I don't suggest you do is not bother putting an SD card in this and just keep it in this, because as I said, the imagery that you get from this is stabilized, whereas it's not on this. One more thing that I would do in the goggles, and I certainly find this helped me, is you can set a center point, which allows you to obviously judge better when you're flying through tight gaps. So you can set that in the goggles here. Also, for me, and this might be a slightly subjective thing, I have the grid on as a further way of just being able to judge where I am in the center. Okay, now that we've got over all the settings and stuff, one of the biggest complaints that people have when they first start flying any FPV drone, let alone this one, is motion sickness. And it is a big problem when you first start out, and it can be very, very off-putting. I suffered from it, but I found a few tips online and a few tips on forums, and these are the ones that helped me the most. So the first one that I've got is really sit down. I found that when I was standing up, the motion sickness was a lot worse. So I found that sitting down really did help me. The other thing is if you tuck your head in like that and you're just looking down slightly as if you're looking at the controller, your head doesn't move as much, and that also helps because obviously when you're flying through trees and things like that and drones going like that, it's involuntary, or at least for me, that I sway a bit, and by doing sort of looking down like that, it definitely helps. Another tip from Lone Star UAV gave me right at the beginning was to sort of keep the horizon in focus when you're looking through the goggles, and that I think helped me too, and that was a really great tip. One other thing that I've seen on a lot of forums, now I haven't tried this, but they definitely helped me as a kid, was when I used to go on school trips, I'd get really bad travel sickness in a coach, and my mum bought me these bands, and they look like sweatbands, and they got this little white plastic knob that sort of presses into your wrist, and they, for whatever reason, I don't understand the science of it, helped me get over the motion sickness. Now, people have been recommending for those for flying the FPV drone, and from what I can tell, they are actually working, and I can say that they certainly helped me when I was a kid with motion sickness, so that might be another one. One more thing really is, because when I first got this drone, the Fly More kits weren't available here, so I only had one battery. I was going out, flying the heck out of that battery, coming back and charging it and going out again. So that was giving me the breaks. And I think taking a break helps. So if you do have the Fly More kit, don't necessarily use all 3 batteries at once, no matter how tempting it is, because it may be that when you start feeling motion sickness, if you take a break and then come back to it, I think that does help. And the last thing really is just perseverance. As I said, I've been flying this for a month now, and it took me about a week or so of a hell of a lot of flying to get over that motion sickness, but I really don't feel it anymore. In fact, I can even fly this standing up, although I still prefer to sit down because I sway, and that then does kick in the motion sickness. Anyway, let's move on. DJI do say that these batteries last 20 minutes. Now, if you fly this like you fly this, or you fly it really slowly, then yeah, you can probably get 28 minutes out of a battery, but let's face it, you're not going to fly this like this, because if you are, then just keep this and don't bother with this. You're going to be lucky if you get 10 minutes out of a battery. On a windy day, and I was flying this off the coast a lot, I was getting 6 to 7 minutes, but I was trashing this. I highly advise that you do get the Fly More kit if you can afford it, because really, trust me, one battery is not enough. The only thing I will say is, if you're used to these, the batteries take a while to charge on these. These are super quick. They take about 30 minutes, so it's pretty cool. So if you can get yourself a car charge as well, that would be really useful, because they don't take that long to charge. And now let's get on to the modes that this drone has. This has 3 main modes. It has normal mode, sports mode, and manual mode. And we'll talk about manual mode towards the end of the video. But normal mode is really the mode that, if you've never flown anything like this, is where you want to start and get used to it. Normal mode in this is kind of like a sports mode in this. This goes about 35 miles an hour. It's a much more agile drone. As it stands at the moment, DJI provided no way to sort of tune the settings like you can with one of these in either normal or sports mode. You can tune it in manual, but you can't do it for sports or normal mode. The next thing is that this has crash avoidance sensors, but they do not work like they do on here. Whereas with a GPS drone and you fly up through an obstacle, it detects it, it will just stop. This does not. This will fly up to the obstacle, it will know that's there, and it will slow down and give you time to react. If you do not react, this thing is going to crash into the obstacle that it detected, and it won't prevent that. So be warned on that. In sports mode, when you do get there, unlike a GPS drone, these sensors are kind of working. They don't slow the drone down or anything, but what they do is they detect the obstacle, and they will warn you depending on where in the area of your screen it is by flashing orange or red to depending on how close you are. Now, once you start flying this, as I said, I would start off flying in normal mode because it's a very different beast altogether, and just get used to that. One of the things that you tend to do with certainly these kind of drones is be a bit more aggressive on the controls. With this, it's a really responsive drone, so you're going to have to be much more gentle on the controls. Now, I found a good way of practicing this and just learning to be softly on the controls was I found this track near where I live. It's around a park. It's just a track that goes around this area of land, and I just constantly flew around that. To start with, I would be really soft with the controls and just get used to how agile they are. So flying around a track really helps to train that muscle memory and get you used to it. Now, if you don't have a track near you, you can go out and get a couple of those sort of like little mini football cones and just mark those around a park and just practice flying around them and just get used to how this drone operates, because it despite people calling the normal mode and sports mode Mavic modes, I think that's a bit of a misconception, because this really does not fly like a Mavic. Now, once you've sort of mastered normal mode and you're moving over to sports mode, there are 3 flavors of sports mode. Now, I went straight from normal to the top tier of sports mode, which is the highest roll, because you can adjust how far this drone rolls. You can set it to no roll, small amount of roll, or large roll. Now, some people have complained about going from normal to the highest roll. Sports mode can cause motion sickness. So what you can do is adjust that to no roll or low roll, just so you can get used to the difference in speed and agility of this drone by pressing the C1 button on your controller. That changes or swaps between the 3 different sports modes if you haven't already set that to something else. Default out the box, that's what it does. Okay, so the last thing to cover really is manual mode. Now, I feel that there's a lot of YouTube videos out there that put pressure on pilots, especially you GPS camera drone guys, of learning to fly the manual mode on this drone. I would say for about 80% of the footage that most of you guys probably want to get out of this drone, you can do that in sports mode. You can have a lot of fun in sports mode, and in actual fact, if you never learn manual, I don't think that's going to be a waste, because what you can do in the sports mode, if you're used to flying one of these, is just exhilarating. So don't feel the pressure that you have to learn manual. Now, the reasons that you might want to learn manual is there is a certain amount of footage that you just won't be able to get in the sports mode. Things like when you want to nosedive the drone down or hillside and do sort of pull-ups, like that kind of thing. That can really only be achieved in manual mode. But if you're used to flying a GPS drone, if you've never flown manual, it is not at all like flying a GPS drone. It's very, very alien. So the first thing I would say is don't be tempted to go and switch this into manual mode. First, learn to fly on the simulator. Now, DJI provides something called DJI Virtual Flight. It's only available on iOS for some reason. I don't know why they are against Android, but I found using that app with the goggles on cause motion sickness even after a month. I think it has something to do with the graphical refresh rate, and I just couldn't get on with it. There are much better sims out there, in my opinion. There is the Liftoff one, where people have already created mods to sort of represent this particular drone, and there's the DRL sim, which is the Drone Racing League sim. There are other ones out there, but these are the ones that I've been using, and I have to say I'm really impressed with the tutorial on the DRL sim. It's really detailed. There's lots of little lessons and you can progress at your own pace, and it's really useful. Another great thing is that DJI have allowed you to connect this remote to the computer, so it will work on both Mac and PC, and it's great. You just use the USB-C cable that came with it, you connect it, and both of these sims pick this up. You do have to run through the calibration, but once you've done it, away you can go and you can practice to your heart's content on these sims. Now, one of the things that you're going to need to know is that out the box, the sticks on your controller are spring-loaded, but when you learn to fly manual, because your left-hand side controls how much acceleration or how fast the propellers spin, which is different from a GPS drone, you don't want that spring-loaded in there, because obviously in a spring-loaded thing, it's just going to go back to the center, which is 50% power. So what DJI have done with that little Allen key that they provide you, which allows you to change all the screws in here, there's 2 screws at the back of the controller, which if you can adjust, means that you can remove the spring loader so that the stick stays wherever you've set it. You're going to need to do that before you really start off in the sims, or it's going to make life a lot more difficult. To enable manual mode on this drone, you have to go into the goggles and set your custom mode to manual and not sports mode. That's the button here on the controller, because out the box by default there's a safety feature that when you switch that to M, it just stays in sports mode. You can change that over to manual mode, and that's the first setting you need to do. There is another setting, because full manual mode will allow you to obviously just turn the drone over, do loop-to-loops and everything out like that. When you switch to manual mode first on this, it does have a altitude limiter or tilt limiter, which is actually, if you want to start out practicing, and I'll be honest, I left this on when I flew this in manual, will help you learn to practice. And for a lot of the stuff, again, you might never need to switch that off and go full acro, because it does allow you to do nosedives, but not quite as much as obviously full acro mode will do. You have to turn that setting off, and that's here in another cheat sheet. I probably haven't covered everything in this video. I've covered most of the things that I could think of. If there's something you want to know or you've got a question, please leave it in the comments below. I try to reply to all of my comments, because you guys watching my videos, really, it's a huge kick. So I do try to reply to every single comment that I get, good or bad. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting the like button, because it tells YouTube that this is a good video and more people should watch it. I'm going to be making a few more videos around the FPV drone. I'm going to be making one about the motion controller, because I think that deserves an entire video on its own. So if you like that kind of video, I also make photography stuff and the odd vlog here and there. So if you're into that kind of thing, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss another one of these videos. Anyway, guys, it just leaves me to say happy flying. I hope you're safe and well, and I'll see you in the next one. But for now, bye-bye.